I caught my husband in our living room with my son's fiancée, just hours before the ceremony. I had gone to grab a notepad, mind elsewhere, when I saw them through the doorway. Franklin stood far too close to Madison, his hand hovering over her lower back like it lived there. My throat closed. I stepped forward, ready to demand an explanation, but motion on the stairs froze me in place. Elijah. He stood in the hallway shadows, face expressionless, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I already know, and it's worse than you think. On the morning of my son's wedding, I was up at 5, not because I needed to be, because sleep was a stranger. I told myself it was excitement, the natural anxiety any mother would feel on a day like this. I sat in my home office with spreadsheets open and no idea what they said. My small, home-run CPA firm had paid for Elijah's college and papered over the gaps Franklin's paycheck didn't reach. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Outside, Atlanta was still night dark, but in my mind, the lawn was already filled. Rows of white chairs, squared to the rose-covered arch Franklin built. String lights I'd tested 3 separate times, because one dead bulb could ruin a perfect evening. I needed everything to work. Our Elijah deserved that much. 25 years of marriage to Franklin. 23 years of motherhood. I was the one who remembered the dentist, the property tax date, the birthdays, the casserole for the neighbor's funeral. He was the charmer, the showman, the warm laugh and firm handshake. I was the foundation he stood on. And for years, that was enough. Lately, it hadn't been. The quiet in a room when I entered. The slight tilt of his phone away from me. "Just work," he'd say. "Big promotion on the line." You don't throw away a quarter century over a suspicion, I reminded myself. So I believed him. I had to. The office door clicked. Elijah stood in the doorway in pajama pants, clutching coffee he clearly needed. His father's face, my careful nature. "You've been up for hours," he said, sliding onto my desk edge. "The wedding's at 4. Mom, I want it perfect for my boy," I managed, packing away my computer. "Dad's already gone," he added, tone oddly flat. "Said he was grabbing a gift for Madison's parents." A new detail, one I hadn't heard. "A gift." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something?" I turned my chair to face him. In the desk lamp's harsh light, he looked older and painfully young at the same time. "Do you think Madison really loves me?" The question hit like a body blow. Madison, polished, ambitious, from a family old money recognized on sight, looked perfect on paper. But I'd noticed the small things. The way her gaze drifted when Elijah shared something he cared about. The phone she checked over dinner. The way she smiled a little too bright when Franklin entered a room. "Why would you ask that? It's your wedding day," I said softly. "I know," he muttered. "Maybe it's last-minute nerves. But sometimes, when she looks at me, it's like I'm not really there. Like I'm a box she needs to tick on her way to the life she drew up when she was 10. He swallowed hard. "And lately, she's been spending a lot of time with Dad. She says he's helping her learn about investing. Mentoring." I wanted to tell him about Franklin's eyeline following her automatically, about how his hand found her coat, her glass, her chair, how he knew her coffee, 2 sugars and a splash of milk, without asking. Instead, I squeezed Elijah's fingers. "Jitters are normal," I said. "Marriage is a big step." "It's not just jitters," he whispered, voice cracking. "I think she's in love with someone else." My blood went cold. "What makes you think that?" "The small things," he said. "How she lights up when Dad calls. How she asks about him before she asks about me. Yesterday, they were in the garden talking, and the way he looked at her." His voice faltered. No father-in-law should look at his son's fiancée like that. That's a serious accusation, I forced out. I know. God, I hope I'm wrong, he said, and the helplessness in his voice nearly undid me. Before I could answer, Franklin walked in. Crisp shirt, pressed slacks, the picture of control. Well, look at my two favorite people, he said lightly, a showman hitting his mark. Big day, son. You should be dressing. He turned to me. Simone, you're going to wear yourself out. Madison's coming by at 10 to finalize the seating chart. Elijah's jaw tightened. What details? Making sure her parents don't sit near your Uncle James after that political fiasco last Christmas. Franklin said with a throwaway grin. Sensitive topics. Better handled privately. Right, Elijah said flatly. Wouldn't want the wrong people near each other. The air went dense. Franklin didn't notice or pretended not to. When they left, dread took up residence in my chest. I was supposed to discuss final timing with the caterer at 10:30. I called and lied. Family emergency, I said. I had to clear my morning, not for checklists, for truth. I fidgeted through an already spotless kitchen, rearranged centerpieces, listened for footsteps, with a heart that couldn't decide whether to sprint or stop. At exactly 10, a white BMW turned into the drive. Madison stepped out, casual clothes turned glossy by the way she wore them, and walked to my front door like she belonged there. I slipped out the back, crept around the side, and crouched behind the hydrangeas under the living room windows. From the bay window, I could see everything. Franklin let her in. They met by the fireplace where we took our Christmas photo every year. He poured champagne. They stood close. Closer. His hand found the small of her back and lingered. 25 years in these rooms. Elijah's first step across that rug. Birthday candles, family jokes, New Year's toasts, and my husband's palm sitting on my son's fiancé's back like it had a right to be there. I rose, ready to fling open the door, ready to burn the day to the ground. Then a shadow moved in the upstairs hall. Elijah, half hidden by the railing, watching. Still, white, frozen. This wasn't just my heartbreak. It was his. Downstairs, Madison touched Franklin's chest and tipped her head back. He laughed. A sound I hadn't heard in years. The easy, unguarded laugh that used to belong to me. His hand slid into her hair. They kissed. Not a quick mistake. A sustained decision. I surged forward, rage roaring in my ears, and a hand caught my arm. Elijah had slipped outside and found me. He looked pale and carved from ice. Mom, don't, he said, voice tight. Elijah, I couldn't complete the sentence. I know, he said. I've known for weeks. The word weeks tore something in me. We crouched together in the mud behind the flowers I had coaxed into bloom. Two people hiding inside a life they no longer recognized. Inside, the two of them had moved to the sofa. I refused to watch. I didn't want to believe it. Elijah whispered. I told myself stories. She's nervous. He's being kind. But it kept happening. The looks, the private conversations, the electricity when he walked into a room. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, anger and protection twisting inside me. Because I needed proof, he said, jaw hard. And because I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves. He took out his phone, hands trembling, as he navigated to a folder. I hired someone. What do you mean? A private investigator. My breath caught. Elijah, the money. It was worth it, he said simply. He handed me the phone. The first photo showed Franklin and Madison walking into the St. Regis downtown on a Tuesday he'd claimed to be at a regional conference. The second, them leaving 2 hours later, rumpled and flushed. There were 17 separate sets of photos, 17 different lies with timestamps. Dim restaurants, hotel lobbies, his car in shadowed lots, heads bent close in a life outside our own. I stood, then dropped back down. My voice came out like steel. "We're stopping this. Now." "No," Elijah said sharply. "Not like this. If we storm in, they'll deny. He'll call you hysterical. She'll cry. They'll twist it until we question our sanity." He was right. I could already hear Franklin's polished tone. "You're overreacting, Simone." I was offering advice to a nervous young woman. "So," I asked, breathing through fury, "what do you want to do?" He gave a small, unfamiliar smile that both chilled and steadied me. "We end it in front of everyone. Publicly. Total exposure. Legal consequences. No shadows left for them to hide in." I looked into my son's eyes and saw someone new, someone formed in the crucible. I looked through the window and saw my husband unbutton his lover's blouse on the couch where we read to our child. The wife I had been, understanding, forgiving, willing to shape myself around his comfort, died right there in the dirt behind my hydrangeas. "Tell me the plan," I said. The evening felt like a dream filmed in slow motion. Franklin came home looking like a poster for paternal pride, asked if I needed help with the final vendor calls, laughed about his reception speech. I smiled, nodded, played my role while inside I screamed. Once he began to snore softly beside me, Elijah and I met in my office with the door locked and the blinds drawn. The lamp threw a tight circle of light over a stack of evidence that would make a prosecutor rub his temples with glee. "Who's your investigator?" I asked. "Aisha," he said. "Aisha Whitfield. My little sister." I let out a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. "You called Aisha." "I didn't know who else to trust," he admitted. "She did 20 years on the force. Now she runs her own agency. And she never really liked Dad." I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. "Simone, it's past midnight. What's wrong?" "Everything," I said. And in those minutes, I told her all of it. Elijah's suspicions, what we saw, the photos. I cried in that raw way you forget you're still capable of. "I'm not surprised," she said quietly when I finished. "I've seen the way he looks at that girl." I was hoping I was wrong. "Elijah told me about the photos," I said, wiping my face. "What else do you have?" "I've been tracking them for 3 weeks. Her voice turned professional. "Twice a week at the St. Regis. He pays cash. Lunches he'd never buy you. Last week he took her to Cartier." A fresh flame raced up my spine. "Our money, the careful savings meant for safety and rest. There's more," she said, softer now. I dug into his finances to find the cash source for hotels and gifts. He's been sloppy. "What did you find?" Monthly payments going back 15 years to a woman named Nicole Jenkins. She was a junior associate at his old firm, left abruptly. The payments started a few months after. My heart thudded. "She has a daughter," Aisha went on. 15. Zoe. No father listed. I'd stake my license he's the dad. I stared at nothing, seeing everything. Another child. Another life. 15 years of lies. The business dinners, the golf weekends, the late nights that were never quite explained. They slid together like a lock closing. "I need to know," I whispered. "I figured," Aisha said. "If you can get me a clean DNA sample from Franklin, I have a way to get a private, preliminary comparison against a sample from the girl. It won't be legal in court, but it will tell us what we already know." After Franklin finally fell asleep, I slipped from our bed and moved through our house like a stranger. In the bathroom, I stood over his toothbrush as if it might bite me. My hand shook as I placed it in a plastic bag and sealed it. I left it in the mailbox just before dawn for Aisha to collect. By midday, the house hummed with photographers and florists. Aisha called. "I have more on the money," she said, voice grim. We met in my car around the corner, the one place that felt private. She opened her laptop. The spreadsheet on her screen was a blizzard of dates and transactions. "He's been making cash withdrawals for years," she said, pointing. "Never more than 1,000 at a time. Different branches. You thought it was for his rare coin hobby." I nodded, mortified. "His hobby has a name," she said dryly. "Madison. Hotels, restaurants, jewelry. But the worst part isn't cash." She clicked to a new tab. "He took loans against your pension. The account from your practice that was supposed to carry you through retirement. Almost 60,000 in the last 18 months. How?" I whispered. "He'd need my signature." "He forged it," she said softly. "A decent forgery, but not yours." Something inside me lurched. This wasn't just infidelity. It was theft. Not just my heart, my future. "And Madison?" I asked. "She's not a bystander," Aisha replied, jaw set. "She's been embezzling from her firm. Inflated expenses, fake vendors, funds siphoned to a shell company using her mother's maiden name. Over 200,000 in the last year. I can trace some of it to gifts for Franklin, a $1,000 watch, part of that Cartier necklace." The disgust in my mouth tasted metallic. My husband stealing from our retirement to shower his mistress, while she pillaged her partners to buy him presents. A perfect, obscene circle. Then Aisha handed me a manila envelope. "Preliminary DNA," she said. I opened it. Numbers and terms spun until my eyes landed on the line that turned my world into dust. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Zoe Jenkins was Franklin's daughter. 15 years of marriage wrapped around a secret a 20-minute drive away. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and felt nothing and everything at once. When I finally lifted my head, I said what needed to be said. "Put it with the rest of the evidence." We sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of a lawnmower and the quiet collapse of a life. "What about Madison's parents?" I asked. "The Ellingtons, pillars of the community." Aisha said, "Her father's a federal judge. Her mother chairs 3 charities. They have no idea their daughter is about to be handcuffed." For a flicker of a moment, I felt sorry for them. The sympathy didn't last. "So," I summarized, voice like ice, "Franklin is draining our retirement to fund his affair. Madison is robbing her law firm to spoil her lover, who also happens to be her future father-in-law." "It gets better," Aisha said. "He invested some of your pension money into a can't-miss real estate deal Madison pitched. The deal never existed. The money went straight into her private account. She's conning him, too." I let out a humorless laugh. The man who always thought he was the smartest in any room, taken in by a woman 20 years his junior. Poetic, if it hadn't cost me everything. I looked at the file in my lap, organized tabs, labeled exhibits, neat stacks containing the demolition of my life. "Can we do this?" I asked. Fear and adrenaline wrestled in my chest. "Can we stand in front of 300 people and end it there?" "What other option is there?" Aisha asked. "If you do it privately, they'll spin, deny, isolate you. Publicly, there's nowhere to hide. This isn't just revenge, Sinone. It's consequences. Madison needs to face criminal charges. Franklin needs to be held accountable for fraud. This ends permanently only if it ends out loud." I pictured Elijah's face, tight and determined. I pictured Zoe, a girl who looked like the man who broke me and had done nothing to earn the fallout she was born into. I pictured the arch I covered in roses, the lights I checked, the perfect afternoon that would be anything but. "You're right," I said. "We do it that way. Then we do it clean."
Aisha replied. "I'll handle the screen."
I drove home to put on my dress and my armor. I went home to put on my dress and my armor. The hours before the ceremony passed with a surreal calm. I floated through the house like a host playing her part, approving last-minute changes, answering polite questions, pointing florists where to go. Inside, a wire pulled tight through my chest. Aisha slipped in early, in a black catering jacket, hair in a low bun, a lanyard that said AV support. No one looked twice. She synced her laptop to the big projection screen behind the altar, the one guests assumed would play a cute montage of Elijah's baby photos. In her pocket, she kept a small matte black remote. One click would end the charade. I had my own checklist. In my clutch, a flash drive with every piece of evidence labeled and archived, a sealed envelope with notarized divorce papers, and a handkerchief I knew I wouldn't use. By 4 o'clock, the lawn glittered. The rose arch I'd tended all spring looked like something out of a glossy magazine. The string quartet tuned, the light softened to gold, and the guests, nearly 300, settled into rows of white chairs. Franklin sat beside me. He leaned in, voice low, like a husband in love. "You look beautiful, Simone. Isn't it a perfect day?" I held his gaze and felt nothing but cold emptiness. "Perfect," I said. Madison appeared at the end of the aisle moments later, wrapped in white lace and borrowed sanctity. She smiled at the crowd, then allowed her eyes to stray, just for a breath, toward the front row, toward Franklin. A flicker of recognition passed between them. Victory, even. They really thought they'd won. Elijah stood at the altar, steady as stone. When Madison reached him, he took her hand with a calm that broke my heart and made it whole at the same time. He searched the crowd until he found me, the smallest nod. Now, the officiant began the familiar script. Love, faithfulness, honor. The irony sat so thick I could taste it. They exchanged vows they had already broken in practice. The guests dabbed their eyes. I sat still. Then the officiant smiled. "If anyone here knows a reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." Air vanished. The lawn became a held breath. I stood. A ripple of shock moved through the chairs like wind through tall grass. Heads turned. A bridesmaid's hand flew to her mouth. Franklin stiffened beside me and grabbed my wrist. "Sit down," he hissed. "Don't do this." I slipped free, as if his touch were fire. I looked past him at my son, the only truth on that altar, and then at Madison, whose smile had already started to crack. "I'm sorry for the interruption," I said clearly, voice carrying in the hush. "But there is a reason this marriage cannot proceed, and everyone here deserves to hear it." Judge Ellington, her father, began to rise, indignation gathering in his face. "Mrs. Whitfield, what is the meaning of—" "The meaning," I said evenly, "is that your daughter is standing at the altar under false pretenses, and the groom's father has been her accomplice." Franklin moved to speak again, but I was already reaching into my clutch. I pressed the button on Aisha's remote. The projector bloomed to life. The first image snapped into focus on the screen behind Elijah and Madison. Franklin and Madison kissing, soaked in our living room's afternoon light. It was not a peck. It was a choice. The sound that came from the crowd was primal. Gasps, a shout, the clatter of a dropped glass. Madison's mother went sheet white, one gloved hand to her throat. People stood to see better, as if proximity could soften what they were witnessing. "This isn't a one-time mistake," I said. "It has been happening for months." The next image, them entering the St. Regis. Timestamp clear. A Tuesday afternoon he had labeled a conference. Another, them leaving, rumpled, cheeks flushed. Another, his hand on her waist at a dim restaurant. a look exchanged across a table meant for two. Franklin surged to his feet. "These are doctored," he barked, voice teetering between fury and panic. "Simone is unstable. This is..." I clicked again. Bank statements flooded the screen. Line after line of cash withdrawals, spread across branches, kept under thresholds. A scan of a loan against my pension account, my signature forged with enough confidence to assume I'd never look. A Cartier receipt for a $15,000 necklace, followed by a photo of Madison wearing that very necklace at her bachelorette party, neck arched to show it off. The noise dwindled to an awful silence. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was numbers and ink. "My husband has been siphoning from our retirement to fund his affair," I said, steady now. "And the bride. She has been busy as well." The screen shifted to internal financial documents from Madison's firm, inflated expenses, false vendors, transfers into a private account tied to a shell corporation under her mother's maiden name, over $200,000 in a year, a bank line that led to a luxury watch, another that matched travel. In the fourth row, two partners from her firm stared, fury and disbelief hardening into something else, resolve. I took a breath. And we haven't reached the deepest cut. The DNA report filled the screen. Simple, stark. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Next to it, a photo of a bright-eyed 15-year-old girl with my husband's gaze. "This is Zoe," I said, the words scraping my throat raw. "She is Franklin's daughter. He kept her and her mother hidden and supported for 15 years, while telling me there wasn't enough for rest, or trips, or time. While raising Elijah in the light, he kept another child in the dark." For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The world we had curated, guests, music, flowers, light, fell into a silence that hummed like a live wire. Madison crumpled. Lace and tulle pulled around her as she hit the grass with a sob that split the spell. People rose. Some reached for her. Others pulled out phones, lenses trained on the wreckage. Franklin looked from the screen, to me, to the faces he'd entertained for years. Panic won. He ran. He shoved past chairs, knocked a tray of champagne flutes to the ground, slipped through a gap in the hedge toward the driveway. Aisha appeared from behind an oak with the ease of someone who's done this before. As he barreled past, she angled one foot out. He went down hard, suit streaked with grass, breath knocked from him. "Going somewhere, Frankie?" she asked mildly, flashing her PI badge from beneath the patering lanyard. "Might want to stay put." By then, Elijah had left the altar and reached my side. He put an arm around my shoulders, solid as a wall. Madison clawed her way upright, mascara streaking, fingers stabbing the air toward me. You planned this. You ruined my life." "No," Elijah said, voice cutting clean through the noise. "You and he did that." Two uniformed officers moved down the aisle. They did not go to Franklin. Not yet. They stopped in front of Madison. "Miss Ellington," one said quietly, "you are under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud." The click of the handcuffs closes some chapters you didn't know were still open. Her parents stood frozen, her mother weeping in disbelief, her father's face hollowing into a mask that would be remembered in photographs he never intended to exist. Cameras flashed, the ones hired for the fairy tale, now capturing the collapse. Guests began to scatter in clusters, some fleeing, some lingering in whispers, the story already leaving our property via 100 texts. My legs trembled, the adrenaline ebbed, and with it, the strength borrowed from anger. Elijah tightened his arm, anchoring me. "It's over," he whispered. "It's finally over." I looked around at what should have been perfect, a shredded aisle runner, trampled petals, toppled chairs, and let the first deep breath in months fill my lungs. Not relief, not yet, but air. Still with me. Drop 1 in the comments so I know you're here. The next 3 hours blurred into sirens and shivers. Blue lights washed our hedges. Guests huddled in clumps, whispering as crews quietly dismantled the reception that would never be. Someone righted the chairs. Someone else gathered dropped programs and soggy petals. A photographer who'd been hired for joy snapped photos of the wreckage. Proof that even perfect scripts can burn. Police took our statements on the patio, pen steady, voices gentle. Madison was escorted to a cruiser, veil tucked awkwardly under the doorframe. Her dress, once pristine, looked theatrical and tragic in the dusk. Franklin was questioned briefly and released. He didn't look at me or at Elijah. He got in his car and drove away. "And you?" Elijah asked later, that soft old warmth peeking through the strain. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "I think I'm just numb." The days that followed scraped by. Our names leapt across local headlines. Grainy phone videos multiplied online. Bride arrested at altar. Groom's father exposed. Hidden daughter revealed. I stopped answering calls. Only left the house when I had to. A few longtime clients slipped away from my practice without explanation. Some people fear scandal like a contagion. The morning after the wedding that wasn't, I did what I'd promised myself I would do. I walked into my attorney's office with a purse that felt like a vault, marriage certificate, account summaries, the flash drive Aisha had curated, and the signed, notarized papers that would end a quarter century. We filed, with the mountain of evidence, photos, withdrawals, forged signatures, DNA. Franklin didn't even posture at a fight. The process was fast and merciless. In the settlement, I kept the house and a significant share of what remained, expressly as compensation for what he had siphoned from our retirement. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like balancing a ledger that should never have been touched. Madison's path was clearer still. The state built a sturdy case in days. Facing serious time, she took a plea. 2 years in a low-security facility and full restitution to her firm. The Ellington name, once a pillar, began quietly coming down. Her father resigned from the bench. Her mother stepped away from boards. It was brutal. It was also the truth. Franklin's collapse was smaller and more private. He lost his job, lost the invitations, lost the gaze that used to welcome him into every room. He moved into a generic apartment across town and stayed out of sight. If anyone missed his laugh, they didn't say. The hardest part arrived in a plain envelope 2 weeks later. Nicole Jenkins. Her note was short, careful, respectful. She apologized for the harm her past with Franklin had magnified through our lives. She said Zoe had learned the truth from the news, that she was confused, that she wanted to meet Elijah and me. I kept the letter on the kitchen island for 3 days, moving it from one corner to another like a hot pan. How do you look at the living evidence of your undoing and not see only the man who did it? She hadn't made these choices. She had been born into their consequences. I handed the letter to Elijah. He read it once. "I want to meet her," he said, immediate and certain. "She's my sister." So we agreed on a neutral cafe halfway between our towns. I shredded a napkin with my hands while we waited. The bell above the door chimed, and they walked in. Nicole looked worn in the way women look when they've been carrying too much for too long. Careful hair, tired eyes, polite posture. Zoe hovered behind her, clutching a paperback to her chest. And then I saw it. The eyes. Franklin's. Not the arrogance or the deceit. Just the shape, the focus, the spark. My breath hitched. She was scared. A child in a crossfire she didn't choose. In that moment, I knew. My anger didn't belong to her. It never had. That first meeting felt like stepping onto a new language. Elijah carried us. He asked about school and teachers and the book in her hands. He told her about the park near our house and where he used to ride his bike on summer nights. He didn't say Franklin's name. He didn't have to. I mostly watched and nodded and tried not to map her face over the memories of my own. We paid and said we'd keep in touch and stepped out into the sun, feeling both heavier and lighter. We met again. Coffee turned into lunch. Texts began to stitch the days between. Elijah and Zoe discovered a shared love for old movies and food that made their noses run. I started to look forward to her laugh, to the way she wrinkled her nose when thinking, to the small stories she offered one by one. She wasn't a symbol, she was a person. Bright, funny, kind, an innocent threaded through the wreckage left by adults who should have known better. A year crept by. The divorce finalized. The headlines moved on to newer fires. I poured myself back into the work that had always been mine, orderly numbers, honest lines. And slowly, the clients who mattered returned. I sold the big house, the rooms heavy with echoes, and bought a smaller, sunlit townhome that fit me as I was, not as I had tried to be. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was mine. Elijah started therapy. It steadied him in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. We left the corporate track he'd climbed because it felt expected and enrolled in a landscape architecture program he'd whispered about for years and never chased. Work that combined art and rigor suited him. He began designing courtyards and pocket parks, places where light and stone and water made sense again. On weekends, I'd find sketches scattered across my new kitchen table, smudged with graphite and hope. He met someone too, quietly, without spectacle. A librarian with an old soul laugh, who listened when he spoke about soil pH and shade patterns as if those were love languages. The way she looked at him, like he was the only person in the room, reminded me that not all stories end in fire. Zoe became part of our lives gently, the way sunrise slides across a floor. We started with coffee and moved to lunch, then to Sunday dinners every other week. Elijah teased her the way only brothers can. She rolled her eyes and grinned and texted him memes I didn't understand. She'd sometimes bring a book and tuck it under her leg as we ate, just in case the table fell silent. It never did. I learned her tells, how she twisted a ring when she was nervous, how she burst into laughter when a joke finally landed 5 seconds late. I found myself setting an extra place without thinking. The first time she hugged me at the door on her way out, I stood there with my hand on the knob and felt something loosen in my chest I hadn't realized was clenched. She wasn't the shadow of a betrayal anymore. She was Zoe, my son's sister, a person I would stand in front of if the world ever tried to harm her. Life didn't click back into what it had been. It became something smaller, cleaner. The big house with the perfect lawn and heavy memories had become a chapter marker. The townhome was a sentence I could breathe inside. Clients who drifted in the storm eased back, one by one, with quiet hellos and normal questions about quarterly filings. The sound of my own work, keys tapping, paper sliding, printer hum, felt like faith returning. About a year after the wedding that never happened, the doorbell rang, just after dinner. I opened it and found a man I used to know well. Franklin looked older, like time had captured him all at once. The confident polish was gone. He had the tentative posture of someone who knew he no longer owned any room he entered. "May I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the chair as if he expected it to disappear beneath him. He didn't give me a script. He didn't try to flip the story. He said he was in therapy. that he was trying to understand the rubble he'd created and why he'd kept choosing matches. He apologized for the lies, for the money, for making our home a stage where everyone but me knew their lines. He apologized to Elijah through me, to Zoe. I listened. I believed he meant it, meaning it didn't change anything. I forgive you, I said, and the words surprised me by fitting in my mouth. His head jerked up, wet-eyed. You do. Not for you, I said. For me. I can't carry this anger anymore. It's too heavy. He nodded, a small tremoring sound caught in his throat. But I will never trust you again, I added. We won't go back. He stood then and left the way he'd arrived, quietly, respectfully, finally understanding that peace and permission are different things. That night, brushing my teeth, I thought of the woman I had been a year earlier, knees in the dirt behind the hydrangeas, heart breaking in a house she'd tended like a garden. I wanted to reach back through the mirror and tell her what I knew now. You will not drown here. You will learn to breathe again in a life with fewer lies and more light. The family I built once was not what I thought it was. It cracked and fell away on a sunny afternoon with the quartet playing and cameras ready. What grew in its place, me, Elijah, Zoe, a smaller table with enough chairs, was imperfect and honest. It didn't glitter. It felt real. And for the first time in a long time, real was enough. Thank you for staying with me. If any part of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters here. And if you want more stories like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you made it to the end, drop a 1 below so I know you were here with me. Be gentle with yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.